It's time now for the award-winning #1 local talk show in Northeast Pennsylvania, The Sam Lesante Show. Now here's your host, Sam Lesante.
Thanks for joining us, my friends. Today we're going to learn something about children. All right, we're going to discuss things that sometimes we really don't want to hear. Children who are physically abused, sexually abused, and neglected. Yes, it's unfortunate we have that, but thank God we have an agency in town, in the county, that helps. And today I want to talk about that. And the interesting thing is, do you know of anyone who is being neglected, abused, physically or sexually? And how many of us sometimes know or suspect things may be going on, but we don't want to get involved until it's maybe too late? My guest today is Shannon Peduto, who is the Executive Director of the Luzerne County Child Advocacy Center. And I thought it'd be a great opportunity for us to talk about this. Shannon, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, it's an interesting job.
Yes.
I can never do it.
We hear that a lot.
I could never do it because, you know, I have grandchildren. I love them dearly. People have their children, you know, and then when you find and see some of the things that happen, you scratch your head and you wonder why and how come. Okay, but let's talk about a couple things. The Advocacy Center, okay, what is it?
We get that question a lot, actually. A lot of people think that we are just there for general childhood questions, issues. We mainly handle children who disclose physical abuse, sexual abuse, and neglect. So that is our mission, to provide free services to those children and to their family members.
All right, so now that covers a lot. Okay, how does one then, you know, is this reported via authorities? Is it reported via someone living in the home, or how does that happen?
The report could come from anywhere. It could come from school, it could come from Childline, it could come from children and youth, law enforcement. It could be somebody just making an anonymous phone call someplace. But the way they get to our center is we have to make sure that somebody can make the parties accountable who did this to children. So we need law enforcement involved, we need children and youth involved, we need the district attorney's office involved. So in a normal day for us, if you are law enforcement or children and youth, you make the phone call to our center and you start the process of coordinating services for these children and these families.
Okay, so I opened up saying that we have areas: physical, sexual, and neglect. All right. Now, of course, you know if someone's being physically abused, you may see bruises, or correct, God forbid, sexual or neglect. What is the barometer? I mean, how do you know what's going on? I mean, how do you know? Because certainly the person who's doing it, they're not going to call your agency. It has to come through either someone seeing something, a teacher noticing something, or a guardian, or whatever. How do you notice that? I mean, how do you find that out?
Usually, as you said, the neglect situations, the physical abuse situations are usually easier to spot. People are very physical with the children. Their homes may be in disarray. They may be a mess. There may be feces in the house. So you can visibly see that. Children and youth, law enforcement can see that. If a child is physically abused, they may go to school with bruises on them. If you touch their back to say good morning, they may flinch, which is odd for a child. So because of that, there's easy signals that you can say, yes, I see bruises, something's not right. But when it comes to sexual abuse, it's not as easy to see. It's something that is usually hidden, and it takes a child usually disclosing, this is what happened to me, before we even know it's taking place. The only way that you may notice that something's off with a child is if they're acting funny, their grades start to drop. They become very aggressive when they've never been aggressive before. They shut down, they become a recluse, and they don't want to be with anyone. That's usually when we're like, something's not right, and you start to ask questions.
Okay, so I was a teacher, and sometimes teachers can notice different things. Let me ask you this. Where do you get your most referrals from?
Wow, all over, honestly, all over the place. We get it during the school year. The bulk of them will come from schools and guidance counselors because you see them every single day. Yeah. In the summertime, it would be community members, or if there's a summer party going on and say law enforcement gets called, that's usually how we'll find out that way. But it's usually people in the community seeing that something is not right and making a report.
All right, so it's a very touchy thing. It's very touchy, okay? You may suspect that your neighbor is beating up their child or neglecting their child. Sexual abuse is something, I don't know, it's a very difficult thing to determine, but physical and neglect. How, and do we get involved? Do we make this call? Then we're going to be brought in. They're going to hate us.
Correct.
What if it's, and these are questions that just drive you crazy. And, what do you say to people like that who have that doubt, and fear?
We hear that all the time, is something's going on, you don't want to get involved because you say it's their business, or you don't want something coming back at you, especially if you're neighbors, you live in the same place. Bad things may happen to me if I report it, but there's so many anonymous tip lines now. Because child abuse has become so prevalent in our community, there's so many other ways that you can make an anonymous tip. The laws have changed now to where people are mandated reporters. And though everybody is not a mandated reporter.
What's that? What's a mandated reporter?
A mandated reporter is somebody who, by law, is supposed to report if they see child abuse. So it usually depends on their profession. And I know they've expanded the definition of mandated reporters. So there are a large group of people that are considered mandated reporters. But in my mind, if you, just as a human being, a community member, you see a child being hurt, hit, bruised, burned with cigarettes, it is your duty as a decent human being to make that report. And if you don't want to say this is who I am and this is what's happening with your name, your address, all the information, you can always call Childline, which is actually through the state. You can make an anonymous report. You can call Children and Youth and make an anonymous report. Law enforcement. But I encourage people to at least make that first call.
That's always the concern. So all right, so you suspect something's going on, okay? And sometimes people will be, particularly if you're a teacher, you'll be carefully watching. Maybe the person did fall, etc. But then you start looking at what's happening, how they're acting, etc. And then you feel that there's something not right here, okay? Right. And so now we're gonna put that phone number on the phone. Okay, Sammy, if you want to put that phone number, which is 570-208-2895, extension 302, but just if you remember 208-2895. Now, when you said there's a child advocacy line, what is that? Is that a 800 number or something that they call?
It is. Childline is an 800 number that they call, and you can just Google it online to find that information. But it is run through the state where all the child abuse disclosures and reports go through. I do not off the top of my head.
All right, so the reason I say that is because, when people see you're from Luzerne County, this show is playing in Carbon County and Schuylkill County and Lackawanna County as well. So they have their advocacies. How many centers are there in Pennsylvania?
When I began this position in 2014, there was maybe 24 centers. Now, 5 years later, there's 32 of them. So I believe right now in the northeast region of Pennsylvania, every single county has a child advocacy center.
So Schuylkill County has theirs, Lackawanna County has theirs.
Yes,
okay.
Correct.
And it's a child advocacy centers.
Correct.
Okay, folks, I'm talking to Shannon Peduto, who is the executive director, talking about how do you determine that. Okay, and let's talk about if you don't report. Some of the people that have seen some things and they don't want you to get involved, and down the road you hear terrible things. In some cases, maybe the child commits suicide, maybe the child is murdered, and what kind of trauma will that child live with, particularly if they're being sexually abused in the future. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to the Sam Lesante Show, folks, 24/7 SSP TV. I want to say a special thank you to many of you who see my wife and I and come up and tell us about our shows. I got a very, very wonderful phone call the other day from a lady from Freeland who watched our show on the seniors, the scams, and I had attorney Mike on, a board-certified elder law attorney, and she made the response, thanked us so much for all the shows we're doing, as well as Sacco Chiropractic. She went there, she listened to Janine, etc. So we try to provide as much information as we can, folks. Remember, if you have any interesting things that you'd like to discuss, my email is sam@ssptv.com. Speaking of that, 21 shows we have. You can download them, SSP TV, search our app, local shows, Neighbor Talking to Neighborhood. My guest today, Shannon Peduto, who is the Executive Director of the Luzerne County Child Advocacy Center. Now, I was talking to you during the break. I was at your place many years ago. Explain the house that I saw and what's in there. Okay.
People usually think that we're a normal business center, it's very cold, but we specialize in children. So our center is actually a 3-story Victorian home located in South Wilkes-Barre. When you walk in, our quote-unquote waiting room is a living room, has a TV, a fireplace, toys, a couch. Our interview room has 2 chairs in it, and it has a sky mural on the wall, blue walls, white clouds. Our medical exam room is actually an ocean mural, so there's fish all over. And when we bring the children in, we ask them to find Nemo. They look for Nemo throughout the entire visit, and on their way out, they find Nemo near the doorway. So it keeps them occupied and busy, and it's a great place for them to be. It's so child-friendly, so warm. They usually take their shoes off and they don't want to leave.
You know, I said I could never do your job because I'd end up killing people, you know, especially when you see some of the cases you have seen so far. Were they cases that were reported upon seeing a bruise, or were there some cases that either the neglect or the sexual neglect or sexual activities were happening? What was the time period here?
We get calls, there's no specifics for anything. So we literally can get a call that something just happened at 11 o'clock at night, a sexual assault, a child has been raped. We can get that somebody has been beaten. It could have happened a month ago, a year ago. It could have happened within 24 hours. And thankfully, we have services in place that we can respond to all of those.
Okay, so now here's the thing. You detect that there's something wrong going on. What's the average age? I'm sure there's no, I mean, what is the average age that you're dealing with?
The normal age that we see for abuse situations are between the ages of 7 and 12 because they're the most likely to believe the person. So perpetrators are family members. They're not, I grew up on stranger danger. Stranger danger is not what it was when we were growing up. It's different now. It's family members who are doing this. So these children between 7 and 12 are the most trusting. You're able to threaten them, they will believe you, and usually the threats will be to other family members, to their pets. So because of that, they're the easiest to influence and the easiest to almost trick into getting what this perpetrator wants.
Now, it's always that first call, you know, that you suspect something going on, and then, you know, so all right, so you detect there is something going on. So maybe there is and maybe there isn't. How do you determine whether that person, you know, well, I saw him with a bruise on his arm, or his, you know, and I know that his father, his mother, his sister, whatever, okay, I'm calling, okay. How do you determine whether that really is an abuse or not an abuse?
What we tell people is, if you have any inkling, if you see a bruise, something going on, don't you be the determinant. Please call it in and let the professionals be the last and final determination. We've had situations come in where children were playing football and ended up in picker bushes and ended up going to school and having scratches all over them. But those people called, the teachers, guidance counselors called because they weren't sure.
So what do you do then? I mean, like, what do you do?
Basically, the child would come to our center. We'd have all
but okay, wait a second. No,
Sure.
But if you're making a call, not to interrupt you, but you're making a call, and you have suspicion.
Yes.
Okay, so now do you call the authorities, and did the authorities go to that person's home, and that person saying, "What are you doing here? I didn't do this. My child." I mean, so you have so that process. How does that work? You know, that, you know, is effective. I know it's effective, but I want our viewers to know that this is what happens when that call is made.
Right. So if this were happening, say the child went into school covered in scratches, either the teacher or guidance counselor would notice that this is happening. They would usually let the guidance counselor know. Guidance counselor makes a phone call, would call either the authorities of where it happened, would call children and youth, would call someone. Law enforcement or children and youth would then take that information, call our center and say, I need to get this child in for an appointment to see what's going on. All of us have been doing this so long. We have what's called a multidisciplinary team in Luzerne County. All of these entities are part of the multidisciplinary team. We are all trained well enough that usually the parties can tell if this is something that was inflicted upon a child or something that may have just happened. So with that information, we take the information, we always bring the child in, we sit with them, we have specialized interviewers called forensic interviewers who sit with the child and have a conversation. Through that conversation, we find out if it was just them playing football and ended up in a picker bush or if something happened.
Okay, so I was at your place, okay, and it's beautiful, okay, and it certainly doesn't look like an office, it's a home. The child is traumatized, okay, they're now sitting there. They know that they've been abused by whomever, you know, a parent, a guardian, the brother or sister or whatever, the neighbor, all right? They're terrified. They're 10 years old, all right? And a lot of psychology has to be involved here, okay? So what you're saying is you do have people there who could walk through this, because that person then has to go back home, or does that person go back home? How do you determine that?
Correct. So what happens is when the child comes through the door, we have people greeting the child and the non-offending family members with the child. What do you mean
non-offending family?
We only allow the non-offending family members, which means if, again, usually these people are family members who are perpetrators. No perpetrators are allowed on our property. So if it's mom or dad hitting the child, or if it's sexual abuse, they're not permitted on our property. Somebody who is a safe family member is the person allowed to bring them to our center. When they come in, they're greeted by one of our staff members. We have an administrative assistant, greets them at the door with a smile, escorts them to our waiting room, basically looks like a living room. Then we have a family advocate who sits with them the entire time they're in our center, explains the CAC process to them, tells them what to expect, shows them who the people are in our center. We have forensic interviewers who will come down, introduce themselves to the child, to the family members, start to build rapport with them. The child then goes to our second floor, which is where our interview room is located, meets and sits with the forensic interviewer. So it's a one-on-one conversation that happens in a room. And then the family advocate sits downstairs with the non-offending family members. A lot of times we get disclosures from those family members of stuff that's happened to them as children as well. So there's a lot of counseling, things happening in that room while the child is gone, because the family members are suffering just as much as the child when they find out what's been going on. Then we do a medical exam, and we have a nurse practitioner on staff who will take the child into our medical exam room and perform a well health exam. We can take physical evidence pictures if there's bruising, if there's cuts. We can also do something as extensive as what's called a rape kit to gather physical evidence on the body to help prosecute a case. So we could do a gamut of things, but all of these services are happening in one place. Law enforcement comes to our center, the DA's office, the district attorney's office comes to our center, as well as children and youth. We make sure that all parties are there, so it's one visit, one time the child has to tell their story.
I know that you designate certain months for, abuse prevention month, and, I know April's that, but to me every month is a prevention month. I mentioned before the break, sometimes young children who are living in this fear, if you don't report, if you don't call, things happen, okay? A child could commit suicide. I don't know, am I being too extreme here?
Not at all. We see it, unfortunately, we see it all too often. Children are cutting themselves, hurting themselves. Some children are committing suicide because they can't deal with the trauma of what happened to them.
And I could just imagine a person who probably noticed abuse, but because they didn't want to get involved, they then read that child committed suicide, okay? Sexual abuse is another thing. I mean, I think that's a very difficult thing, unless the child's showing some really crazy thing or something, right?
Correct.
And of course, neglect, that's some parents or some guardians or some people just leave their kids alone, and you hear all these sad stories. Folks, I'm talking to Shannon Peduto, and we're talking about child advocacy. In each county, there is a child advocacy center. When we come back, wrap it up, we'll talk about what you can do to help save a lot of children. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us, folks. It's the Sam Lesante Show 24/7. Remember, Pottsville, Channel 190, 7 to 11 p.m. every day. Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, Kingston on the Service Electric Cablevision. We're on Channel 92 from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. Saturdays and Sundays. Lackawanna County on Comcast 190 Sunday and Saturday mornings from 8 to 11. My guest today is Shannon Peduto, who is the Executive Director for the Luzerne County Child Advocacy Center. I know April is Prevention Month, but I say every month should be Prevention Month. What are the telltale signs that one should look for or see or notice before they call your, and the number's on the screen, folks, before they call that number?
If you're seeing something, experiencing something, if you're out and a parent is too aggressive, excessive yelling, cursing, you're grabbing the child. If a child that you know in your neighborhood, in your community, is acting differently, they were a happy, normal child and now they're hiding, they're miserable, their grades have dropped immensely. Anything that in your mind and in your gut says something's not right, I encourage you to make a phone call. You don't have to investigate anything yourself. Please let professionals do that.
And that call
make
is
the phone call.
Anonymous.
Yes, it can be anonymous, and you're welcome to leave your name if you'd like, but it can be anonymous. So that's why I encourage everybody, if you have an inkling, please call. You could save the life of a child by one phone call.
Yes, yes. And I'm sure there's many people in the country who hesitated to call and heard very nasty things. Your success rate, okay? You know, when that child comes in, they're traumatized, and I know that house that you're talking about, folks, it's fabulous. It's not even, I mean, it's only you're going in a very comfortable house. It's, you know, I was there, it was a lot, it was, you know, I said, wow, this is great. Success rate, okay? What happens then when you know the child? Does the child go back to the parents or go back to that place, or what do you do?
At this point, this is why we bring all of our team members in of the multidisciplinary team. So children and youth can do a placement for the child in foster care, somewhere where they're safe. Law enforcement can then go make an arrest of the perpetrator. District Attorney's Office can then prosecute that person. So that's why we do this as a team effort. The child goes out safe. We've seen children come in with their heads down, hoods over, and they have the weight of the world on their shoulders. They come out from here, they don't want to leave our center. They're smiling, they're happy, that weight has been lifted. We've taken that burden from that child and that family, and we're more than happy to do so.
I compliment all of you people, really. I really do. I can never, I said I can never do it because like I said, if I saw a child being abused, I'd have to end up breaking their legs. Or, I mean, you just go crazy.
Right.
I mean, particularly with parents, if they find out their kids are being abused and not aware of it, I mean,
Right.
You can see why some of these parents, you know, flip out, okay? And it's sad. But thank God we have agencies like yours, the Advocacy Center. I've been there. It's a wonderful place, and there should be no excuse, folks. If you think there's any physical, sexual, or neglect, any of those abuses going on, you can call anonymously. The phone number is on the screen. Anything you'd like to say to our viewers, Shannon, in closing?
Sure. We've been in existence for 5 years now, and in 2018 we served 554 children who reported abuse, and in our lifetime we've served over 3,000 in Luzerne County alone. So I encourage people to please, please, please make those phone calls. You could save a child's life. I always say, you know, people say it takes a community to raise a child. I say it takes a community to save a child. So please do what you can for the children. They're the next generation. They're our most valuable possession in life because they are the next generation.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. I got 3 grandchildren. I know what you're saying, okay? And I love them dearly, and God forbid something should happen to them. Grandpapa's going to be very upset. Once again, Shannon, thank you so much for doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
All the people that are involved with that center are fabulous people, okay?
Thank you.
I know most of them. But I was there, and it's a beautiful place, and I know that you saved a lot of sad people in our county. Schuylkill County has one, folks. Lackawanna County has one. Carbon County have one too.
Carbon County does not,
Okay.
but we do have Susquehanna, Wyoming,
Okay.
Pike County, Monroe,
Okay.
all of them.
They all have agencies, but the phone number that you call is 570-208-2895. You call that number, and if you're calling from Shenandoah or from Pottsville, or whatever, they'll give you the correct number. Wish you the best.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on the show, okay? And once again, folks, thank you very much for those constructive comments. I love them, okay? But those people who appreciate our shows, I really appreciate that. My wife and I do. And all of us here at SSP TV appreciate that. We'll see you next time.